The number on the page didn't match. It was off by exactly $312,000, and in my line of work, that kind of precision is never an accident. I set my coffee down without making a sound. I didn't panic. I didn't gasp. I just looked at the figure the way I look at every tax return that crosses my desk, with the quiet, cold understanding that someone had made a choice, and that choice was going to cost them. What I hadn't expected was that the someone would be my own mother. Let me back up. My name is Maya. I'm 31 years old. I'm a tax attorney, which means I spend most of my life inside spreadsheets and estate documents and IRS correspondence, looking for the thing that doesn't belong. People think it's a boring job. They're wrong. Numbers tell stories. Sometimes they tell the most devastating stories you've ever heard. And sometimes they tell your story back to you in a way you weren't ready for. My grandmother passed away in February. She was 83, sharp until the very end. The kind of woman who did the crossword in pen and never once asked for help. She raised 4 children mostly on her own after my grandfather died young, built a small cleaning business into something real, and quietly, methodically, accumulated a life worth leaving behind. A house in Scottsdale, savings, investments, and a will she had drafted with her own attorney, notarized, witnessed, filed. I knew she loved me. I knew it the way you know the sky is blue, not because anyone told you, but because it was just always there. She called me every Sunday. She kept a photo of my law school graduation on her refrigerator. When I passed the bar, she sent me a card with $50 in it and wrote, "This is just the beginning, my love. You were built for more than they can imagine." I didn't fully understand that line until now. The will left her Scottsdale house and $750,000 in liquid assets to me, equally split between myself and my cousin Daniel, her other grandchild who had stayed close. The rest of the estate went to her 4 children in smaller portions. It was all very clean, very deliberate. She had talked to me about it once, 2 years before she died, over lemonade on her back patio. She said, "You and Daniel are the ones who showed up. The house and the money go to the ones who showed up." My mother was one of the 4 children who did not show up, not often enough to matter anyway. She drove down to Scottsdale twice in the last 5 years of my grandmother's life. Both times, she had a reason, a favor to ask, a bill she needed covered. I watched it happen and said nothing because I was raised to say nothing, to smooth things over, to be the reasonable one in a family that had never once rewarded me for being reasonable. My mother is the kind of woman who can cry on command. I mean that literally. I've seen her do it in 3 different settings: a church fundraiser, a PTA meeting, and once at a car dealership, and every single time someone handed her what she wanted within minutes. She has a gift for it. She can take any situation and reframe it until she is the wounded one, the overlooked one, the one who deserves more. When the will was read and she heard the numbers, she didn't cry. She went very still. I watched her jaw set. I watched her eyes do the calculation. That should have been my warning. The call came 12 days after the funeral. My mother's voice was warm in a way that immediately made the hair on my arms stand up. She said my grandmother's estate attorney had made some clerical errors in the original documents, and that there was a corrected version I needed to review and sign. She said it was just paperwork. She said it would take 20 minutes. She said she was cooking my favorite pasta, and I should just come by the house, and we could handle it all over dinner. I said I would think about it. Then I called Daniel. He'd gotten the same call, same warm voice, same clerical errors, same pasta. We talked for 2 hours that night. Daniel is an architect, not a lawyer, but he's methodical and careful, and he doesn't rattle easily. He said something that lodged itself in my chest and didn't let go. "Maya, Grandma used the same attorney for 19 years. That woman doesn't make clerical errors." He was right. I knew he was right the second he said it. I had met the attorney, a woman named Patricia, at the reading. She was precise, careful, the kind of person who triple checks. She had handed me a copy of the will, and when I'd asked one question about the trust structure, she'd answered without looking at her notes. Patricia didn't make clerical errors. I didn't say anything to my mother. I said I'd come to dinner. I set the date, and then I did what I do for a living. I started digging. The first thing I found was the notary stamp on the documents my mother had emailed me, just as a preview. The notary's license number was real. I looked it up, but the stamp format was wrong. Arizona notary stamps have a specific border style that changed in 2019. This stamp had the old format, which meant either the notary was using outdated equipment, or someone had copied an old stamp and didn't know the rules had changed. I know the rules. That's the whole point of me. The second thing I found was a signature. My grandmother's signature on the corrected documents my mother had sent. I had dozens of my grandmother's signatures, birthday cards, letters, a note she'd tucked in my graduation gift. I pulled them all out and laid them on my kitchen table. Then I printed the page my mother had sent. The signature was close, very close. Whoever had done it had practiced. But there's a thing my grandmother always did: a slight leftward loop on the tail of her capital R. The R in her last name, Reyes. She'd done it that way her entire life, some habit from childhood she never shook. The signature on my mother's document didn't have it. The loop went right. Whoever forged it had never studied that one detail. My stomach turned over. Not because I was surprised I had been preparing myself for something like this since Daniel's phone call, but because I had to fully understand what I was looking at. My mother hadn't just called me to dinner. She had forged my grandmother's signature on legal documents designed to strip me of my inheritance, and she was planning to serve me pasta while I signed them. I sat with that for a long time. Long enough that my coffee went cold and the room got dark and I hadn't moved to turn on a light. The daughter in me wanted to pick up the phone and scream. The tax attorney took over instead. I needed this to be airtight. I needed my mother to walk all the way into the trap before I shut it, because if I called her out now, the documents would disappear. She would deny everything. She would cry. She would become the victim of her own daughter's suspicion. And somehow I would end up apologizing. I had watched that happen to myself too many times. I called Patricia the next morning, before 8, knowing she'd be at her desk. I introduced myself, reminded her we'd met, and asked her one careful question. Had she made any amendments or corrections to my grandmother's will after the signing in January of last year? There was a pause. Then Patricia said, very quietly, "No. The document I filed is the only document. Nothing has been changed." Another pause. "Maya, is there something I should know?" I told her there might be. I asked her to hold that thought and give me a few days. She said, "Of course. But if someone is attempting to alter a filed will, that's a serious matter." I said I was aware of that. I was more aware of it than anyone. The dinner was on a Thursday. I spent the days before it the same way I spend the days before a tax hearing in preparation, so thorough that by the time I walk through the door, I already know how every possible version of the conversation ends. I also bought a voice recorder. Small. The size of a lip balm. Easy to slip into my jacket pocket. Arizona is a one-party consent state. I looked it up twice, just to be certain. I only needed my own consent to record. I had it. I also called Daniel and told him what I had found. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "What do you need me to do?" I told him. He said he'd be ready. My mother's house smelled like garlic and tomatoes when I arrived. She hugged me at the door, the full-body hug she reserves for when she wants something, the one where she holds on a beat too long. My father was in the living room watching television, the way he always was, present but not really there. A man who had spent 30 years allowing my mother to make every decision and calling it peace. She had set the table with the good plates, candles, a breadbasket. The folder was sitting on the kitchen counter, tucked under a vase, like it was trying not to be noticed. I noticed. We ate. She talked about the neighborhood, about a cousin's new baby, about a sale at the home goods store. I listened and smiled and ate the pasta, which was, in spite of everything, very good. My mother is an excellent cook. She's also an excellent liar, and sometimes I think the same part of her brain does both things, the part that understands how to give people exactly what they want right up until the moment she takes something else. After dinner, she cleared the plates, and then she brought the folder to the table with the practiced casualness of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "So," she said, sitting down across from me, "I just need you to glance at this. It really is just a correction." Patricia apparently had the asset figures wrong. There was a discrepancy in the account totals, and the corrected version just reflects what was actually in the estate. She slid the folder across to me. I opened it. I took my time. I turned each page slowly, the way I turn documents at work, visibly deliberate, letting the silence stretch. "What accounts are these numbers from?" I asked. She named 2 brokerage accounts. I wrote them down in the small notebook I had brought, which made her eyes flicker to my hand, and then back to my face. "And you said Patricia prepared this version?" I asked. "Yes, of course." She caught the error herself. "When?" A small pause. "About 3 weeks ago." "After the reading?" "Yes. Like I said, she caught it after." My mother's voice was still warm, but there was something tighter underneath it now, a string being pulled. "Can I keep this copy?" I asked. She hesitated. Just one beat. Then, "Of course. But I'll need your signature tonight. If you don't mind, Patricia needs it back by Monday." There it was. The deadline. The pressure wrapped in politeness. I looked at the signature line. I looked at my grandmother's forged name on the pages before it. I looked at my mother's face, so steady, so practiced, so sure of herself. I thought about every Sunday phone call, every birthday card, the lemonade on the patio in Scottsdale. "You were built for more than they can imagine." "I have a question," I said. "Of course. The notary stamp on page 7. Do you know which notary Patricia used for this version? Just for my records." Something moved behind my mother's eyes. Very fast. Gone before most people would have caught it. I caught it. "I'm not sure," she said. "You'd have to ask her." "I will," I said. "I'll call her this week." My mother smiled. "Great. So you'll sign tonight and then follow up with her?" "Actually," I said, "I'd like to get my own attorney to review it first. Just standard practice. I do it for every document I sign. You know how I am." The warmth in her voice cooled by exactly 1 degree. "Maya, it's just a correction. Patricia already." "I know. I just want to be thorough." I smiled at her. The same smooth smile I use when an IRS agent is being unreasonable and I need them to think I'm not. You know I'm careful about paperwork. It's literally my job. She laughed. It was a laugh I recognized, the one that means she's recalculating. Of course, she said. Take all the time you need. I drove home, sat in my car, in my parking garage, and played the recording back, clear as a bell. Every word. Then I called Patricia. She had her own attorney join the call within the hour. By 11 o'clock that night, I had sent them the documents, the recording, my notes on the notary stamp, and photos of my grandmother's authentic signatures, alongside the forged one. Patricia's voice when she heard the recording was the kind of quiet that comes from someone who has spent decades in law and still has the capacity to be genuinely appalled. This is forgery, she said. This is fraud. This is a criminal matter, Maya, not just a civil one. I knew that. I had known it since Tuesday. But there's a difference between knowing a thing and being ready to say it out loud in the world, to hand it over to the machinery that grinds slowly and produces consequences you can't take back. I was ready. What I had not fully accounted for was my mother's next move. She called me Saturday morning. The warmth was completely gone. Her voice had a new edge to it, one I had heard before, but not often the edge she used when she was done pretending and ready to fight. I know you're talking to Patricia, she said. I know what you think you found. Before you do anything stupid, you need to understand something. Your grandmother wanted that money to help this family. Not just you. She told me that. She told me a lot of things she never put in the official documents because she trusted us to do the right thing. I let her talk. The recorder was running. You're going to destroy this family over a piece of paper, she said. Is that really who you want to be? Is that what she raised you to be? There it was. The invocation. The appeal to the woman whose name was literally forged on the documents. Mom, I said, very calmly. I'd like to ask you something. If Grandma said all of that to you, why didn't she say it to Patricia? Why didn't she amend the will through her own attorney? Silence. Why did the notary stamp have a 2017 border format when Arizona changed the format in 2019? More silence. Heavier. And why does her signature on those documents not have the R loop she used on every single document she ever signed in her life? My mother hung up. I sat with the silence of the disconnected call for about 30 seconds. Then I texted Daniel. She knows. Moving to next step. He replied immediately. Ready. Here's what my mother didn't know. While she had been planning her Thursday dinner and forging signatures, Daniel and I had already been in contact with the county recorder's office, Patricia's firm, and a probate litigation attorney named Robert, who came recommended by two of my colleagues as the person you call when a filed will is being contested or tampered with. Robert was very good at his job. He was also the kind of person who moved fast once the paperwork was in order. The original will was filed. The corrected documents my mother had circulated were not. They had never been filed anywhere because they couldn't be the real. Patricia had never seen them before. I sent them to her on Thursday night. Whoever had prepared them had done so privately, carefully, but without the one thing that would have made them legally meaningful. Actual submission to the probate court. Which meant my mother's plan had a flaw at its center. She needed my signature. Mine and Daniel's. Without both of us signing, the documents were nothing. They were expensive, elaborate, criminal nothing. She had invited me to dinner to get the last piece. I had come to dinner to collect the confession. The formal complaint was filed the following Wednesday. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft by deception. Patricia cooperated fully. The probate court put a hold on any further changes to the estate while the matter was under investigation. My mother called 6 times that week. I didn't answer. My father texted once, just my name. No message, and I looked at it for a long time before I put the phone down. I don't know what he knew, or didn't know. I don't know if he was complicit or just adjacent. The way he had always been adjacent to every hard thing in their marriage. Maybe I'll figure that out eventually. Maybe I won't. What I know is that my grandmother spent 83 years building something real. She did it carefully, deliberately, the way she did everything. And she made a decision about what to do with what she had built. She wrote it down. She had it witnessed. She filed it. She had accounted for the people who showed up. She had also, I think, accounted for the possibility that someone wouldn't accept it. That second line in the card she sent me when I passed the bar, you were built for more than they can imagine. I wonder now if she meant more than I'd imagined, or more than they had imagined I was capable of protecting. I think she knew. I think she had watched my mother for decades with the same quiet, careful attention I bring to a tax return, and she had seen the number that didn't belong, and she had done what she could to make sure the record stood. I finished that for her. The estate settled 4 months later. The Scottsdale house went through probate without incident. Daniel and I both received our portions exactly as the original will specified. Patricia sent me a handwritten note afterward. It said, simply, she chose correctly. I framed it. It's on my wall. My mother is dealing with the legal matter through her own attorney. I don't know how it will resolve. I don't know if there will be criminal charges or a civil settlement or something else entirely. That's not my case to manage anymore. I handed it to Robert and to the court, and I let the machinery do what machinery does. What I can tell you is this. The day I walked out of the probate court with the final paperwork in my hand, I sat in my car and I called my grandmother's phone number. I knew no one would answer. I knew the number had probably been disconnected months ago. But I called it anyway, and I listened to the silence, and I said out loud, I showed up. I drove home. I made coffee. I opened my laptop. And I went back to work. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being the responsible one. The careful one. The one who reads every document before she signs it. It's not a curse. It feels like one sometimes. When you're younger and you just want someone to take care of things so you don't have to. But it's not. It's armor. It's a skill set that accumulates quietly for years. Right up until the moment someone decides you're an easy target. And then it's a trap. My grandmother built a cleaning business into something real. She did it on her own, in a world that wasn't designed for her. She raised 4 children and kept her accounts in a ledger she maintained by hand. She trusted the people who showed up, and she made her wishes known through the proper channels, and she signed her name with a leftward loop on the tail of the R. She gave me everything she had left to give. My mother thought she saw an easy signature. She saw a daughter who had been taught to be accommodating, to smooth things over, to be the reasonable one. She forgot that reasonable doesn't mean naive. She forgot what I do for a living. She forgot that the number on the page never lies, and neither do I.